Good morning. It's May 10th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. And, following with my pattern of looking at observances and daily things to watch for out there, today is National Trust Your Intuition Day. I didn't trust mine and I came into work anyways, but still, for those of you, if you got that nagging feeling, apparently this is the day you should be paying strong attention to it. Trust your intuition. Sometimes your first impression's right. Of course, sometimes you're dead wrong too. Don't take full life advice from me all the time. I'm here more to talk about news and opinion. Recent news, some good news. The Flames are hanging in there. Boy, the playoffs, for those who are watching the hockey and interested in those sorts of things, I've just been liking it. I'm not a hardcore hockey fan, but just seeing people getting happy again, honestly, and seeing some excitement and having fun and getting out. And the Flames have had their ups and downs. Last night, it seems they found their feet again and had a good decisive win against Dallas, and the series will carry on tomorrow night. Plus, of course, other teams are all hard at it, chasing that Stanley Cup. Comments, I see lots of them coming in. Debbie from Nova Scotia, I love seeing that stuff coming from across the country out there. Colleen was first in there, and Scott in Fort Mac. Hey, guys, I really appreciate the comments. It lets me know you're there. There's living, breathing people on the other end listening to my ramblings, and it helps keep things going. Discuss things with each other, send questions my way, send questions towards the guests. I'll try to pass them on when I can. Again, that advantage of being live is that we have that interaction, which just makes it much better than an old canned show or something. Replacing that terrible talk radio that's really gone downhill, unfortunately. A couple of good guests today. John Carpay of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. We're going to talk about a number of the actions they got going on. If anything, business has been very busy with him due to all the pandemic restrictions and crazed actions by government and laws that have been imposed. So standing up for constitutional freedoms has been a very busy job for him. And it's great to get him in to update us on some of the work he's been doing, successes and things that are ongoing. Then we got Christopher Oldcorn. He's one of our Western Standard reporters. He's our main Saskatchewan guy. And he also wrote on the weekend, Go Woke or Go Woke, Go Broke. Because, he listed some of the things, Netflix, hey, going woke has not paid off for them. Spotify, on the other end, ignoring the woke, it's doing quite well. Before I get in to check in with Dave Naylor in the newsroom, I'm going to start on to what's got me wound up today, though. And that's this is an issue that's affecting cities across North America, but particularly in Edmonton and Calgary. We're reaching a state of this peak Pollyanna-style denial among the woke when it's actually considered controversial to ask people to pay for products and services. Now, the opioid crisis has been sweeping across North America for years. Addictions are skyrocketing, overdoses are killing thousands, and homelessness and crime is spiking in every major city. There's no straightforward solutions to this problem. There's no magic bullet. It's going to take a combination of addictions treatment, mental health supports, housing initiatives, and law enforcement to get this crisis under control. Most of all, though, we need a solid dose of reality, and many municipal politicians refuse to apply that to this issue. So let's get to the history of what I'm going on about. In Alberta, the light rail transit or LRT stations and trains in Edmonton and Calgary have been overrun with addicts to the point where hardly a day can go by without reading about another violent incident in the transit system. Drug use is open and rampant, while stabbings and random assaults on the system are actually kind of becoming commonplace. Heated transit stations and bus shelters have become de facto homeless shelters, while trains themselves have become pipelines for crime into suburban neighborhoods. We've got multi-billion-dollar transit systems becoming unusable by the general public, and city officials are afraid to do anything about it. Traffic going into city centers has been rising for months as we recover from the pandemic, and people are returning to work. Parkades that languished empty a year ago are filling up again, and streets are bustling with commuters during rush hour. Not so with city transit, however. Transit passenger levels in Calgary remain at 54% of what they had 2 years ago prior to the pandemic. Edmonton is better at 70%, but there's still a 30% drop in ridership. People are returning to work, but they're choosing not to use city transit. And can you blame them? To ride a train, one has to start the cycle of it. You have to entrust your vehicle to a suburban parking lot at a station where there's clusters of addicts hanging around every corner. Vehicle break-ins are a constant problem. If you're one of the stations that still has indoor space, and I'll explain in a moment where that's going, you have to navigate around and over addicts camped out in various states of inebriation while being aggressively panhandled. Discarded syringes are often seen amidst the piles of garbage strewn about as addicts tear through bags harvested from alleys in hopes of finding empty bottles to return. Now, when you get on the train during the ride, open consumption of meth and other substances is often seen. While the ills of secondhand smoke are documented and smokers are chased from all public places, protecting transit riders from crack and meth smoke apparently is not a high priority. Now, once you get downtown, you'll exit into a dystopian scene as wasted addicts shuffle and wander around if they aren't unconscious or even worse, wired and aggressive. It's typical to see first responders trying to revive overdoses throughout the stations and parks downtown as well. This is how bad it's getting. A lot of people aren't going into downtown these days. A lot of people aren't using city transit, and that's why I got to keep laying this out. You're not seeing it, but this is how it's happening. The only thing that's surprising is 54% of riders actually returned. These, I assume, are people who don't have vehicles or other means to get to work. Anybody who can find a way to avoid these hell rides on public transit has chosen to. So how is City Hall responding to this problem in Calgary? Well, first, they closed 4 LRT stations in South Calgary altogether. Rather than try to clean out the stations and make them safe, they just shut them down. Transit users have to shiver on an exposed platform while looking at a heated, shuttered, multi-million-dollar station right next to them. And they're working hard as well to sugarcoat and change the language used to address the situation. No longer does any city official refer to crime or addicts. They refer to social disorder and vulnerable people. Now, this head-in-the-sand approach serves nobody. Call it what it is. The next area of denial and a refusal is to reconsider the honor system for transit fare collection. While every major transit system in North America has some form of turnstile or fare collection for riders in their trains, Alberta's kind of unique in that we allow for an honor system. People buy tickets and board trains with no supervision. Occasionally, transit officers board the trains to check for tickets, but it's rare. I rode for months for a while, and I never got checked once. While many people are law-abiding citizens who will pay their fare on their own, let's quit pretending that everybody will, particularly the addicts. The troublesome people riding the trains are spending every dime they can get to buy drugs. None of them will spend that money to buy a train ticket. Enforcing fare collection on LRT systems will have an immediate benefit in removing the vast majority of the troublesome and dangerous riders. Whether this is done through turnstiles, as most cities do, or with a larger presence of enforcement on the ground, it has to be done. In Calgary, City Councillor Dan McLean, he did a ride-along with city transit officers and posted pictures of it. And he's proposed a turnstile payment on trains. Well, what's happened? He's been pilloried by many of his current council counterparts, along with other pundits. He's being accused of being insensitive and shaming the vulnerable. The woke are going wild and flooding social media with claims that McLean is attacking the homelessness. All McLean is asking for people to do is pay their fares. This shouldn't be controversial. Now, will fare enforcement solve the addiction, crime, and homelessness crisis? Of course not. It will, though, at least take much of that crisis off of public transit so commuters can safely return to using it. If the mess on the LRT stations continues to be ignored, ridership's going to continue to plummet. I mean, shall City Hall just keep their heads buried in the sand on this? Close even more stations while the currently closed ones remain closed permanently? The addictions crisis is real and it's growing. It won't be solved quickly or easily. Now, until public officials are willing to face reality with some of the simplest common sense approaches to at least mitigate some of the harms from the crisis, though, it's not going to be getting better anytime soon. We're in a world of denial. It's causing real damage. And we've got to stand up and clean these things out. They're building a green line in Calgary. They're going to spend billions of dollars more to extend a train line where we can't even get 50% of people, more than 50% of people to come back and ride on the old ones. It's ridiculous. And anybody who questions it gets shouted down as they're trying with Dan McLean. It's ridiculous and it has to change. That's what's got me going now. Okay, we'll move on to some other things. I know there's a lot of stuff breaking in the news today. There's a big one out of the Alberta Courts of Appeal, I believe. Let's bring Dave Naylor, our news editor, in and get the updates there. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going well, Cory. Just had a bit of a lint brush emergency, but things are under control now. So thanks to, we had some good teamwork in the newsroom, and we've got my shirt in a presentable state now.
Ah, fantastic. You look great.
Thanks. Yeah, we got some major breaking story, Cory, on Bill C-69. This was the sort of no more pipelines bill that would basically make it impossible for a pipeline to be built in the country now. Alberta's highest court, the Court of Appeal, has just struck it down as unconstitutional. So that is just breaking in the last couple of minutes, and we're just getting an initial story now ready to go up. That'll be up on the website momentarily. In other court news, an Alberta court has acquitted a Calgary man of he was arrested. He was one of the protest organizers, Cory, of those those protests every week, going down 8th Avenue and marching all over the downtown. He was arrested for breaching public health orders. The Crown had argued it was a private gathering, which is a bit strange, as it was in a public place, and the court has sided with him and acquitted him on charges, saying that it was obviously not a private event and not covered by public health orders. Still in the court system, busy day for the lawyers. Challenged by a BC lobby group against BC vaccine orders has been allowed to go ahead. Judge ruling on that. Got some interesting stuff out of Ottawa. Canada's top soldier, the Chief of Defence Staff, General Erie, testified at hearings last night into the Afghanistan debacle, where our diplomats fled with tail between their legs on a half-empty plane, as more than 1,000 Canadians were left behind and allies were left behind. The general just heaped scorn on the diplomats, saying they had months to get ready for this. Basically said they were incompetent, which is true. Cory, we've all been infuriated by bank service charges. Well, how about this one for you? A guy in Ontario was overdrawn by 47 cents, and the Toronto Dominion Bank ended up charging him $98 for those 47 cents. So he's part of a class action lawsuit that could reap millions and millions of dollars for people who have been overcharged by the TD Bank in the last decade. Our Linda Slobodian's got a story on Derek Sloan, now the leader of the Ontario Party. He's been banned from Twitter for comments he made about Dr. Theresa Tam. And he's saying it's all a big conspiracy by the big tech companies to keep his message from getting out. Competition Bureau has put the brakes on the Shaw-TELUS merger, saying it could be bad for Canadians. And we're already paying some of the highest telecommunication rates in the world. So they put the stop on that one at the moment. Despite 10 years of trying and 10 years of reconciliation attempts, the number of Indigenous RCMP members has actually dropped over those the 10 years of efforts. And the Saskatchewan government this week announced they were hiking the minimum wage to $15. They said they consulted business groups. Well, it doesn't appear they consulted any of the major business groups, because of all the ones that our Christopher Oldcorn has talked to, he can't find any that were consulted. So that's what we've got up there at the moment. Major breaking news to come on Bill C-69, and lots more stuff coming up this afternoon.
Great. Well, I'll let you get back on it and digging into that one, as it did, as you say, just broke. And well, I guess it's kind of a good news story for a change. So thanks for the update, and we look forward to seeing the details as they come out.
Yes, Premier Kenny will be holding a press conference at noon. So obviously this will be a topic of the day when he takes questions. So we'll be seeing what he's got to say. I'm sure it'll be a happy Premier Kenny today.
It should be. He's needed a break. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Cory.
So yeah, to give a little background on that, I wasn't sure. We got some warning the court was going to rule and it was going to come out. I didn't hold out a lot of optimism on C-69. For people who haven't followed, that bill was from back in 2019. It was from the Liberals. It's been coined the No More Pipelines bill. It was it was going to change the regulatory structure. I mean, industry experts were pointing out that under the terms of that bill, there was just no way any large project, infrastructure project, was ever going to be approved by the government. The requirements were just out of bounds. It called for things such as environmental assessments. Like, this is the sort of thing that killed Energy East, and there's one of those things I get upset with the lefties when they start trying to talk economics. They really shouldn't. When they say Energy East was only shut down because it became non-viable, it wasn't commercially viable. Well, that's a yes and no. It was commercially viable. The companies didn't spend all those millions to try and get that pipeline done, only to back out because of changing market conditions. They wanted to do it. They figured they were going to make money at it, but the government regulated it to death. This is the cowardly government way of shutting things down. An ideological prime minister who wants to shut down all oil and gas development. He's not going to take the flack by just outright pulling the trigger on some of it, though he did with Northern Gateway Pipeline. But with the others, the way they do it is they strangle it to death with regulation. And C69 was modeled to do just that. And it was going to impact a lot of other things too, mining projects, natural resources, pretty much anything was going to have a really hard time. You talk to any Canadian investment advisors and that, like we've been a pariah for investment for a number of years for reasons just like this. We're just not a safe place to put your money in. You can't get anything done. I mean, look at the Trans Mountain. Even with the government buying it, they can't seem to get that thing finished. I mean, I've been assured, every time I bring it up, people get upset because I know there's some people working on it. They're under a bunch of heavy NDAs. They can't talk about it, but they're working very hard on that pipeline, and it's moving, but it just seems like it's inching along. I mean, years and years delayed. And then we're not going to see any others after that. And that's what C69 is about. People mix it up with C48, which is another disgusting bill. That was the tanker ban on the West Coast, not the tankers that go out, up and down the St. Lawrence. That's okay. But the West Coast, Trudeau banned the tankers. That's C48. C69, though, now that one, this is just one level, unfortunately. It's an Alberta Court of Appeal. And I mean, I didn't even think it would get to that point, but they've ruled that it's not constitutional. It was a split decision. There was a dissenting opinion. Dave will be reporting on more of the details and things like that out of what came out of that. But I believe that's still going to get probably appealed up to yet another higher court. But I mean, it's certainly a good development. I mean, it's showing that not everybody's agreeing that it's within the government, the federal government's ability to impose bills like that upon the provinces and put them out there. And as I said to Dave, Premier Kenny is going to be a happy camper today. He's right on the brink of we're a little over a week from the leadership review results. Deadline's approaching. I think most of the people who've mailed their ballots already have, but all the same, he hasn't had a lot of positive things to report. It's, particularly on the front with battling Ottawa, he hasn't had a lot of success. Some of us, including myself, question him a lot on just how hard he's actually been battling, but he was, part behind that court challenge to C69, and they've had, at this point anyways, a victory with it. So, yes, it's one decent development out of the courts. So, other breaking news and things like that. Boy, where do you go with all of it? I got John Carpay in the lobby, and as I mentioned earlier, lots of people looking forward to hearing from John. And that's the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. And they have, as Dave was saying and as I was saying, been very, very busy, which is a mixed thing. I guess it's one of those jobs that you do passionately, and your goal is actually hoping that you never actually need to be doing your job any longer. And the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms has had no shortage of work to do because of the constant and chronic impositions of legislation and acts and actions against our individual constitutional freedoms. So they've been fighting hard for us out there. And he's got so many cases. He sent a bunch of press releases to me there, so we'd have stuff to talk about. We didn't have to worry about having too much to talk about. And we'll start going through that list because he's a very busy man and doing a lot of good work. So let's bring John in and catch up on what's going on over there. Should begin in a moment. Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey, are we okay on audio and sound and whatnot?
We are. You're on live, and we're rolling. So thanks for joining us today, John. As I was saying to the audience and the rest, like it's just hard to know where to begin. You guys have been so busy. You've got so many actions going on, and unfortunately, our government's giving so many reasons for you to keep pushing back and launching actions. Maybe if you could give a rundown on I guess what your most pressing cases that you're taking on right now are and where they're sitting.
Well, we've got the Brian Peckford litigation challenging the federal travel mandates. Canada is one of the few countries in the world now that has any restrictions left on travel. Even Greece and Switzerland are recent examples of countries that just within the past week, have dropped their restrictions. I mean, these are utterly unscientific. The vaccine manufacturers themselves have stated publicly that the vaccines don't stop the spread, and everybody knows this. We know this from our experiences with the Delta variant, with the Omicron variant. The vaccine does not stop the spread. So I think it's a political punishment that Trudeau is meting out to the unpopular minority of people that have not taken the COVID shots. So that case is moving ahead. That is significant. Here in Alberta, we've just announced that we are representing a student who's filing a human rights complaint against NAIT, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in Edmonton, which in a very arrogant and cavalier fashion denied a student's request for a religious exemption and simply declared essentially that his religious objection just wasn't valid, as if that institution is able to get into his mind and heart. So that's another one of our cases. Good news in Calgary. The city of Calgary filed an injunction application to ban peaceful protests. Sorry, not to ban peaceful protests, but to make it possible for police to immediately arrest and handcuff and imprison somebody if they honk their horn too loud or if they were outside of a designated area downtown. So that was positive development and very, very sinister on the part of the city to have sought and obtained that injunction ex parte without notice to anybody, secret court application to secure an injunction. And now the city has just said, okay, we're abandoning that.
I think some people have speculated, though, also with the city abandoning that, is that they were worried that they might feel compelled to apply it to people celebrating hockey on the Red Mile down there. And they didn't want to get into that sticky situation, so they just kind of quietly dumped it and backed off. It wasn't really a good point of principle. It was more, I mean, a good outcome is a good outcome no matter what the reasoning. But it's unfortunate it was ever imposed in the first place.
Well, what's interesting about the city of Calgary injunction is that it ties in with the same issue that we saw with pastors getting jailed in Alberta over not complying with the health orders. And Premier Jason Kenney has said, well, you know, I can't interfere with what Crown prosecutors are doing. I can't interfere with the rulings of judges, which is true. But there's a very specific reason why in Alberta we jailed pastors, whereas in other provinces did not jail pastors. And the reason is that Premier Kenney's government went to court, like what the city of Calgary has done. They went to court to get an injunction to enforce the health orders. And what that does is it transforms your regular, ordinary law enforcement, where a public health officer or a policeman might give you a ticket for violating one of the silly COVID rules, and then you get to plead not guilty to the ticket, and you can potentially challenge the constitutionality of the health order under which the ticket was given. And this is kind of your normal law enforcement. Now, what the Kenney government did was they went to court and they obtained injunctions for such that if a policeman or public health order officer believed that you were violating a health order, they could immediately arrest you, handcuff you, and throw you in jail. And that was Jason Kenney's government that sought and obtained those injunctions. And so that completely transforms the law enforcement, because now if you're caught, if a policeman sees you and believes that you're breaking a health order, instead of getting a ticket, you're now in contempt of a court order, and the police can immediately arrest you and jail you. And that's what Jason Kenney did in Alberta, is to change the law enforcement through injunctions.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, you can periodically change the law to suit what you feel is an immediate need, in a sense, using an injunction. Are some of those cases with the pastors still active right now, or have those been resolved through the courts?
They're in various stages. We act for Pastor Coates, and he was charged for violating the Health Act because his church was not going along with these unscientific rules, and that case is still put in abeyance, waiting for the Court of Queen's Bench case, where we were cross-examining Dina Hinshaw in April, waiting for a ruling in that case before the criminal action against Pastor Coates moves ahead.
Okay, so Is there a mechanism, though? I mean, I guess it's on the part of the government or the courts, though, to as we learn, as new information comes out, to back off and change. I mean, maybe a little bit could be excused if, with Pastor Coates, it was early in the pandemic, people really felt he was putting, the congregation was putting a number of people at risk. But we look in hindsight and we realize these larger gatherings. I mean, we're allowing the playoffs right now with everybody in stadiums, and yet the pandemic is still going. Can they say, well, we've learned more, we're going to back off, it's done, sorry about that, and move on?
The Crown prosecutors do have discretion to withdraw tickets. We're sending out a news release, every second Tuesday, just about on, more and more tickets getting dropped. Just recently in British Columbia, there's a woman got a ticket for $5,750. She had gone to the US to obtain medical care. She came back and she had a staph infection affecting her nose. And she said, I don't want to take a PCR test because it's a danger to my health. I might get infected, or maybe it was a lot of pain involved. I don't know what the reasons were. And nope, bang, there's your $5,750 ticket for refusing to take a PCR test. So we brought that up with the Crown. We wrote a letter. We explained the situation, and so we had another ticket dropped. We're getting these tickets dropped all the time, but some of them are going ahead to trial.
Yeah, well, and then likewise with other things. I mean, it's like you're playing whack-a-mole with these vaccine mandates in private institutions and public ones. The early stages of vaccination, we were sold on, or a number of people were, that this is a vaccination like others. It would prevent spread. It would stop it. So again, I mean, it's still arguable as to whether or not you could impose mandates, but people could understand maybe a little more rationale. You're protecting your neighbors, the people next to you. But we know now that vaccines, for whatever benefit they may give, it's not stopping the spread. So, I mean, the justification for these mandates is long gone, yet we're still seeing it. And it seems you have to fight tooth and nail to get every one of these repealed.
Well, it was really tragic to see in September that Nate and I think it was 9 other post-secondary institutions, I think that included University of Calgary, University of Alberta, Mount Royal University in Calgary. They all got together, and after students had paid their tuition, and that was on, without strings attached, no conditions. It was, you pay your tuition, go to school in September. And suddenly in September, they come out with these vaccine passports. And these post-secondary institutions, these taxpayer-funded institutions, suddenly started demanding that every student on campus get injected with a substance for which there's no long-term safety data. In respect of a virus, which with precious few exceptions, it does not pose a threat to the 20-year-olds and 22-year-olds and 18-year-olds who form the vast majority of students on campus. And yet we've had so many cases where the university expelled students and even refused to accommodate students by providing online instruction, which the prior year, the whole campus had been online. Like, it's not like they don't have the technology to do it, but just an incredible arrogance and very vicious attitude towards a minority. Just despicable to see that in a country that considers itself to be progressive and tolerant and enlightened. But as it's been said, society never becomes truly more tolerant, but rather we just shift the object of our intolerance.
Yeah, and going further with the mandates, one that you didn't mention, I saw your release, was for soldiers with the vaccine mandates, and you've got another lawyer on that case.
Yes, we've retained a lawyer who himself is former military, who knows the system really well. We are representing 20 Canadian Armed Forces members. This is still, statement of claim has not yet been filed, but they are being treated horribly and forced out in a way that is somewhat analogous to a dishonorable discharge. I don't know the military terminology, but we're taking the Canadian Armed Forces to court over that. because they too, like the universities and other institutions, have been very irrational, very unscientific. And in all of these cases, we're demanding that the employer or the government agency, they have the onus of putting forward the proof that these vaccine mandates were necessary and backed up by science.
Yeah, well, lots to carry on with. So, I mean, going further, and maybe this ties more into the Peckford case. Like the concern is, you know, we're going to be working through the legal after effects of this last couple of years, probably for some years to come. But what can we do then to ensure it doesn't happen again? Like that's the next fear. You know, we're trying to go through the course with the people who've had their rights infringed on this time. But until we see some legislative or possibly constitutional changes, there's nothing to say we won't have to go through this all over again if some sort of emergency, or that the government wants to declare emergency, will prompt them to override our rights again.
Well, we're in grave danger of moving further along to a communist Chinese social credit system. We released a short video on this within the past week. I think it's on our website. The social credit system in China is not the political party that governed Alberta for 35 years or that was in power in BC, and it's not the federal party. But the social credit system in China, the government uses the technology to monitor where citizens go, who they hang out with, what they do, their purchases, their banking, whether they get on a plane or a train, what groups or activities they're involved in, whether they're praising the government on their Twitter accounts. So the government's watching every citizen very closely. And if you're well behaved as determined by the Chinese Communist Party, and you're a good Communist Party supporter, and if they like your behavior, you get extra privileges, like you get less frequent inspections of your business. You might get a slightly lower interest rate when you go to the bank. If you have a low social credit score, then you can be denied access onto a train or a subway or a plane, because the technology is being used that if you have a low social credit score, you get blocked and you can't go to certain hotels or restaurants. So we experienced a small version of that when we had vaccine passports enforced, turning many Albertans and Canadians across the country into second-class citizens. If you did not get injected with COVID vaccine, you were denied the basic human dignity of being able to go to a restaurant or participate in sports or go to the gym. And even currently, you can't get on an airplane. So we have a lot of work cut out ahead of us to restore freedom, because governments can use digital ID to implement a social credit system in Canada, like what we actually had under vaccine passports.
Yeah, that's another big one we can see rolling towards us. I hope enough people pay attention. A term we used to hear a lot and we don't hear often anymore was social engineering. That was a big one. And that's, where the state was trying to control what we think and what we do. And, social credit is more getting towards, well, how we're going to do it as an enforcement arm to ensure that you stay, keeping that new speak going and walking the line. It's very troublesome. And as lots of people like to point out, things that were called conspiracies 2 years ago have come into being today. So, I mean, as they say, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you.
I remember so vividly in March of 2020, when lockdowns were first brought in, after they'd been in for a few weeks, and it was already becoming obvious to any thinking person that looked at data, was becoming very obvious very early on that this was not the Spanish flu of 1918. Neil Ferguson's prediction about, over 300,000 deaths in Canada from COVID within a few months, proving to be completely false. But, and I remember vividly, there were people saying, you know what, they're going to use these lockdowns as a mechanism to entice everybody to get vaccinated. And they're going to say, the only way to get rid of lockdowns is to get injected. And then you're going to have the whole population get injected. And then when there's a few stragglers, they're going to bring in vaccine passports to really apply pressure, and they're going to pressure everybody to get vaccinated. And that was a conspiracy theory in early 2020. And you know, as you said, that became reality, that conspiracy theory.
Yeah, so people got to pay attention to the warning signs now. Just to finally, with the truckers' protests in Ottawa and things such as that, is the JCCF representing any of the people who have been charged under that, or is that through different lawyers at this point now?
Yes, we are, in the sense that we've got at least a half dozen, if not a dozen, criminal defense lawyers that we have retained. So the Justice Center is paying the bills for the criminal defense counsel for the truckers that were wrongfully charged with criminal conduct, when, in our view, was absolutely false. I mean, the worst thing that the truckers were guilty of is parking infractions. And even there, that's questionable, because the Ottawa police was working with the truckers every day and telling the truckers where to park. So yes, we're paying for the legal defense for criminal defense counsel for truckers that have been accused of criminal conduct.
Great. Yeah, I know there's a lot of fallout there and things on the go as well. Well, plenty on the go, and as we've kind of said, plenty to come. Where can people find more information on your organization in case they want to keep up with it, or if they need legal help, or if they want to support you guys?
So our website's www.jccf, F as in freedom.ca, jccf.ca. Would encourage people to sign up for, we have a newsletter that we send out once every 3 weeks or so, and sign up for the newsletter, and that will give you an update on all of our cases. And there's also an icon on the homepage that says "Need legal help?" ? If you need legal help, complete the online form, and we have an intake team that looks at all of the incoming requests. We are forced through limited resources. We actually have to say no to most of the requests coming in, but we try to say yes to as many as possible and provide legal help to people.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today to give us an update, John. And again, I really do appreciate the work all you guys are doing over there. So carry on, and hope to check in with you again soon, and maybe we'll have some positive stuff to report.
Thanks for having me on your show, Cory. Have a great day.
Great. Thanks, John. So that was John Carpay of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. And as he pointed out, they aren't necessarily directly involved in some of those criminal charges and cases there, but they have been raising and directing funds to help people defend themselves there. I didn't want to ask, I know some people in the comments were asking about specific cases and specific individuals who were charged, and I don't know exactly which ones are being represented by which lawyers, so I wouldn't want to put John on the spot and ask him to answer questions on cases that he's not directly involved with. So, talking on those broader things, as you can see, though, the JCCF is doing a lot of work on a lot of things. Another commenter, I think it was Lone Warrior, put out talking about the vaccines and saying the vaccines were there to prevent hospitalization, not spread. Well, that's what we're at now. But it's long buried somewhere. But I played the video months ago on here. There was a video somebody put together that was fantastic that actually had a bunch of clips of everybody for all the way from President Biden down to, I believe, even the head Nancy, and media members and politicians of all sorts and health experts, all telling us that we had to get vaccinated because it would stop the spread. They sold it to us saying it would stop the spread. They were claiming that at the time. When it became apparent and evident, and then, of course, proven that vaccines don't stop the spread, then they pivoted to how it would reduce hospitalizations, which I agree. I mean, I know there's a lot of debate on it. I'm okay with vaccines. And we get some people have emailed and gone nuts about that. Yes, I've been vaccinated. I'm not ashamed of it. And I'm not worried about it. The thing I've always stood on, though, is it has to remain a choice. It has to. Nobody should be coerced or forced to get vaccinated. That's the big difference. And the reason I got vaccinated, because I do believe, and I know a lot of people argue with me, but I do believe it reduces your chances of an adverse outcome if you get infected. But I made that personal decision, and I did so. And if somebody chooses otherwise, I'm fine with that. And it's not the government's place to force that. But we can't pretend, though, that they didn't try to sell it as something that would stop the spread. They did try to sell it that way. And that's not true. So a lot of the justification for a lot of the passports, the restrictions, the people have been fired, was again that you were going to put your coworkers at risk. You were going to put fellow students in school at risk. They're still pushing on those things. You're going to put fellow travelers at risk if you don't get vaccinated because it doesn't stop, you'll stop the spread if you get vaccinated. Well, that's not true. We found that out. So, that narrative does have to stop, but they misrepresented it. A lot of people did when they were pushing vaccines in the first place. And that leads to even more mistrust. It doesn't help. When you sold us on something that this was supposed to do that it didn't do, it doesn't make it any easier to convince people to get it later now, does it? I mean, just some honesty from the start would have gone a lot farther. If you felt transparency in those studies and in the promotion of these things, I think a lot more people would have made the choice to get it. But it's got to be a choice. And it's not a choice when you're telling somebody, we're going to demonize you. We're going to have our prime minister call you a racist and all those things. He really did. That's how absurd and insane it got. We're going to put people out of work. We're going to prevent you from visiting family in hospitals and care homes. We're going to stop you from being able to travel. Oh, but it's a choice. Now, guys, when you've done all that to somebody, that's a long way from having been a choice any longer. It's heavy coercion, and it's wrong. And again, with the people who don't want to get vaccinated, those who don't by now won't. They're not gonna. So all you're doing is being vindictive and punishing people for their personal choices. I didn't get to my earlier plug that I usually do 4 hour selves when I had Dave on, just to remind everybody. And as I said, there's that court ruling. There's releases we get from the Justice Center. Of course, lots of news items and things always going on. You got to get on to westernstandard.news and take out a membership. If you haven't already, get on there. Use the coupon code TRIGGERED. You'll save $10. I mean, if you take it out for a year. If it's a year, it's $99. So less than $10 a month. Get another $10 off if you use that coupon code TRIGGERED. It's well worth it. It costs you, as I've said, less than old newspaper subscriptions used to cost us years ago. And you get much better content that you used to get from back then. Take it out, check it out. And it also supports us. I mean, there's the other thing. Sure, it's self-serving, but this is how we can keep expanding our newsroom. This is how I have a producer. If you look at the videos I was making about a year ago and these grainy, terrible sound things that we were doing before, we've come a long ways, but there's still a long ways to go, and we're improving. We got Danielle out there, and we got lots of stuff going. And that's all thanks to the subscribers and our advertisers. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And if you already have, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Also, we do have our sponsors, and I should speak to that. Bitcoin Well, those guys have been a good sponsor for us for a long time now. And that's because it goes both ways. A lot of our readers and viewers have been checking them out. They've been getting, results from advertising with us because people are looking into digital currencies. I mean, it's big right now. But I mean, there's so many to pick from. And how do you get into it if you've never been involved in it? How do you make sure you're safe? That's the biggest thing. How do you make sure your money is safe? You worked a lot for that money. It seems like everybody's trying to steal it from you, from the government all the way down to phishing emails you get every morning. Well, this is a group, this is a company, this is an Alberta company. They're publicly traded. It's bricks and mortar, and they will safely help you navigate digital currencies. That's their whole thing. It's not some distant call center. It's not some strange company overseas or something like that. They're right around here. They got ATMs all across the West to make it as practical as possible for you to put things into your Bitcoin account. And they'll show you how to use it, again, to may use it like any other currency, pay off your utility bills, do other things. They'll give you personalized one-on-one service. A real person, face-to-face, will sit down with you and guide you through the process if you want to get involved in Bitcoin. And maybe you won't. That's the thing. I mean, it's an educational site. They got all sorts of resources. Check them out, bitcoinwell.com. And as they like to say, take control of your money. That's the whole thing. If you don't take control of it, somebody else is gonna. We know that. See some of these news stories from Dave. Yeah, the chief of defense staff contradicting the diplomats' claims. We're seeing what's happened in Afghanistan when everything fell apart out there. Last summer, and the Taliban took things back over again. Wow, that Canadian ambassador was out of there like a bat out of hell. I mean, this wasn't a captain who's going to go down with the ship. Gone, ran for it, and claimed that it collapsed so quickly that it was just impossible to, the diplomats are saying, that they couldn't evacuate all the Canadians and Afghan allies fast enough. But the chief of defense, General Wayne here, said it was obvious for months this was coming. Months. The real military experts are saying, no. But you got to remember, who are diplomats? Diplomats, that's one of the best bones that can be tossed to a loyal party servant. That's what it is. I mean, you're not necessarily on the top of the list of favored ones if you get stationed in Afghanistan, but you're still going to make a fantastic six-figure income, have all of your expenses paid, live in an embassy palace. And I won't go into why, but I've been to some embassies when I went overseas in the past. And boy, those ambassadors and consuls live pretty well. I mean, hey, I don't expect them to stay in a Super 8, but it's a pretty plum job. And but these guys, when the going gets tough, in this case, this Liberal got going and abandoned people, and now is making up excuses and stories for why it was done. And the real military experts are saying no, that's not the case. And that general, of course, is pretty upset, saying they poured their heart and soul into that country. And it's painful to see what happened. And again, they were told for months that this was coming. But the ambassador's staff closed the assemble and fled aboard a half-empty military aircraft. So he was stranding 1,200 Canadians and thousands of Afghan allies in Afghanistan while his tail was between his legs, and they got the hell out of there as fast as they could. Not only a slap in the face and possible, who knows what happened to the people left behind who couldn't get out fast enough, but what an embarrassment as a country. We know other countries are seeing that kind of behavior. They see the cowardice on the part of our foreign service, at least in that situation. And we lose that much more respect on the world stage. You're supposed to, see, that's what I mean. It's used as a plum for good, loyal party service. It's not just the Liberals. The Conservatives did it when they were in power too, and things like that. But it is one of those areas that is actually very important, being an ambassador, and you should be picking a competent person there. And I worry, look at the people Trudeau picks for his cabinet, okay? This is not a guy who picks out the luminaries from the bunch and gets the best and brightest for his own cabinet. So no, I don't imagine he's picking skilled, bright diplomats and sending them over to places where it's sensitive, such as Afghanistan. And what an embarrassing, awful circumstance that was. So while they ran away and left a lot of people who were good Canadian allies and people who helped behind. Let's speak about the brilliance of Liberal MPs. This was a story that's kind of laughable, but it made the news. There's a Liberal member of Parliament who was sitting on the crapper in a Zoom call while Parliament was in session. He literally was dialing into a parliamentary session from the toilet in a toilet stall. This was MP Shafqat Ali from Brampton Centre, Ontario. He's the second one in a year for doing washroom things on camera. There was that other one, peed in a cup. He didn't run again, at least. And these Liberals are really something special, but they keep winning. I got to give them that. How hard is it to mute? I can only feel for the people who heard the sounds on whatever went on that queued them up to realize just what one of their members in this meeting was doing. I would hope it was just sound and not camera. They didn't really specify much on that. But, at that level of governance, this level of things you would think. So let's see. Actually, here's some of the stuff. This is John Broussard saying, opposition House leader, the room in question was a toilet stall. It appeared the camera was mounted on the ledge or ridge wall just above the back of the toilet. The MP was literally using the washroom while participating in the sitting. Isn't it just impossible to log out for a few minutes and do what you got to do? If you had a bad meal and, you're starting to touch cloth or turtle and you're really out of options, fine, but it's Zoom. Shut the thing off. They can go without you for a couple of minutes. But again, these are the people who govern us. This is just brilliant. Is this a matter to tear the government down over? No, of course not. It's just a laughable, ridiculous incident, but it is indicative of the quality of people we're getting. And then this same story references, Liberal MP Will Amos, who is from Pontiac, Quebec. He was the parliamentary secretary for industry. He was twice urinating off camera while attending House business by video conference. And he didn't seek re-election because he also had some nudism issues and things going on in the camera, and said he'd consulted a psychologist and they said, don't run again. I suspect it might have been party strategists saying, no, don't run again. Don't put us through this. You've burned your bridge and you're gone. But that's the stuff that makes our news these days. Let's see. I see Mr. Oldcorn in the lobby. Maybe if he's ready to roll, we'll bring him in and start talking about the column Chris put out last weekend. It was a good one. So let's bring Chris Oldcorn in. He's our Saskatchewan, what's the title? Is it bureau chief out there? You're our main man in Saskatchewan on the politics there, Chris.
Yeah, I think I got a couple different hats that I'm wearing. But enjoying it. Nice tie, by the way. I think we coordinate quite well today. So, and I apologize. I'm doing this from my home office and not my home bathroom. So,
well, that's good, and it's much appreciated. I'm not easily offended, but still, there's just things, especially with the lunch hour broadcast, we just don't need to share with everybody necessarily. I do appreciate that. So, and also you've been writing some opinion content, which is great. And you wrote a column that came out last weekend. It's at westernstandard.news. And it was Go Woke, Go Broke. Maybe if you can kind of summarize and run down what you covered there, Chris.
Sure. So if you look at some of the bigger media companies, there's been some controversies lately. We saw that leaked video from Disney with the people in the upper management talking about how they were pushing an LGBTQ agenda. And by the end of the year, they wanted 50% of their characters to be LGBTQ. And then you had like the Florida governor signing in the parental rights bill, which basically you can't teach sex to 5-year-olds, which I'm not sure why we were doing that in the first place. And there's just been a lot of controversy around Disney and Netflix. Netflix, the other day, I was actually watching a preteen targeted show called The Babysitter's Club. And in the show, one of the characters just spurted out of nowhere that she hopes whoever her partner is in the future, and let me make sure I quote this correctly, is concerned about climate change and happy wherever they are on the gender spectrum. That was said by a character who had just celebrated her 11th birthday on the show. That is just, I saw it and I was like, what? And I actually went back when I did the article and actually made sure that I got the quote correctly, but that's exactly what she said. And that is a character that literally 2 episodes before had a 11th birthday celebration. And that's what's being targeted by Netflix and Disney at our kids these days. And it used to be that if you put on a Disney show, it was family entertainment. You didn't have to be worried about what was going to be on the screen. But people are fighting back. So for example, Netflix, it'll be interesting because tomorrow Disney reports their numbers for this quarter, and we'll be able to find out about how Disney Plus is doing. They have lost a lot of market capitalization. I'll explain that in a sec. But Netflix lost 200,000 subscribers in this last quarter, and they were expecting to add 2.5 million. But that's not the bad number for Netflix. They actually said they expect to lose 2 million subscribers in the next quarter. So in other words, in 3 months, they're expecting to lose 2 million more subscribers because people are not liking the content they're putting out. Now, to put this into perspective, market cap is how much is your company worth. So if you have 10 shares and each share is worth $5, your market capitalization would be $50. Netflix lost $50 billion in market cap on their stock in this last period. They are now only worth $80 billion in total for the whole company. So not quite half, but losing $50 billion in market capitalization for a company the size of Netflix is huge. And Disney didn't fare much better. Disney, since the leak of the video and the controversy with them fighting against the governor of Florida and all that stuff that was going on, they lost, and I checked it this morning, $65 billion. Now, Disney, which is one of the most longest successful running entertainment companies probably in the history of the world, they lost that $65 billion. They are now only worth $196 billion compared to Netflix being worth $80 billion. But you have to figure into that account how much real estate Disney actually owns. When you look at the size of Disney World and Disneyland, they have a lot of real estate assets. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Disney Plus. Did they maintain the amount of subscribers that they had? Did they grow, or did they lose subscribers? And if you look at the other entertainment companies that have gone with this woke agenda, they have basically been losing subscribers. The only media company that actually gained subscribers so far in this quarterly reporting time period of the large media companies who have some sort of, either being attacked as being woke or they're attacking their content, such as Joe Rogan with Spotify. Joe Rogan has had numerous people on his show. They get accused of being conspiracy theorists, and then 6 months later, they're actually correct. Spotify actually added, just with Joe Rogan, 2 million new subscribers after he was attacked. They went after the sponsors of the show. You had the woke rockers, Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, pull all their music from Spotify. And during that time period, Rogan even said, I can't believe I actually added 2 million subscribers while they were actually trying to cancel me. He actually added almost as many subscribers as Netflix was expecting to add in the same time period for their entire company. And this is, once again, you try and do this cancel culture stuff. I've been attacked before for cancel culture. I'm still sitting here. And people are interested in it for a couple days, and then they don't care. Because most people don't care if someone tries to cancel Joe Rogan. What they care about is what their kids are watching. And this is kind of like politics. You're talking about what's the difference between some woke thing going after Joe Rogan versus kitchen table issues, where my daughter is actually looking forward to a documentary coming out called What is a Woman, done by Matt Walsh at the Daily Wire. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually in a conversation with someone about that because we were talking about the Supreme Court and the new justice doesn't know what a woman is because she's not a biologist. Let's hope she knows what the Constitution is, but that's a different story. And my daughter then later said, hey, I'd love to watch that. And she's like, well, what is it about? And I kind of explained it. And I explained about the transgendered athlete Thomas in the States winning a bunch of national championships, technically still as a man. And she's like, well, why are men allowed to compete in women's sports? And it's like, okay, so 12-year-olds get this, but apparently college educated people can't figure out what a woman is and a man and why it's allowed or not allowed in sports. And there is a backlash. I'll just use a cycling event in the UK for an example. During the national championships, maybe about 6 weeks ago, the cyclists refused to participate if a transgender athlete was competing. One, because that person was going to beat them by a significant amount of time because they were actually very successful as a male athlete. And then a couple of weeks later, British Cycling banned all transgender athletes from competing because the athletes are now revolting back and saying this is not fair. So wokeness right now is in a very troublesome spot because people are saying, wait, hold on, this is crazy. Later today, I have an article coming out on the Menstrual Dignity Act of Oregon, which will put tampons in boys' bathrooms all the way from kindergarten to grade 12 with instructions on the wall on how to use it. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't recall ever needing to use female menstrual products in my lifetime. And I'm not sure why they are now putting these dispensers in all the schools in Oregon, all the way down to kindergarten, with pictures on how to use it. Do you want your 5-year-old knowing how to use a menstrual product and coming home and asking you that question? So parents there are revolting against it, saying this is completely ridiculous. I don't want my kid being involved in this.
Well, and so, I mean, the thing that's been good in being exposed, though, is when people are able to vote with their dollars or vote with their eyes, we're seeing the outcome. We're seeing Netflix's law. CNN Plus went in the toilet before they barely got rolling.
They didn't even get 10,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
Like, how embarrassing is that? Yeah,
and Disney is dropping, and it was great to see Joe Rogan's example to show, too, because I can't say, well, all of these businesses are struggling. Well, no, they aren't.
Nope.
It's these ones that are putting out this garbage that are struggling.
Yep.
And, people, when given the opportunity, will move away. Because we listen to, and I hate that out of the left all the time, oh, it's good business to go this way. It's good business. No, it's not. It's not at all. And they're seeing that. Dave Chappelle's concerts, he's still packing stadiums. Yep. Getting attacked on stage, but he's he's packing stadiums. The woke said he was toast months ago because he dared to upset the trans activists. And no, he's doing as well as ever when people are given the choice. But then the fear we get, of course, is once the woke realize that, then they work to take away our choice. That's when we got to start getting scared.
And that is what they're trying to do. I mean, if you look at language, for example, I'll just use an example that came out this week. There's what's called the style guides. There's Canadian Press, Associated Press style guides on how journalists are supposed to refer to different things. And AP this week just issued a change on how you should talk about pregnant individuals. You're not supposed to say pregnant female anymore. You're supposed to say pregnant person. So all of the large media organizations that follow AP style, you're now going to see, for example, let's say you read the New York Times. You're not going to see it was a pregnant female. You'll see it's a pregnant person. And anyone with half a brain is like, this is ridiculous. It's down is up is down. This is, Orwell 1984, but happening in 2022. And people are revolting against it. And if you look at in the States, they've had a bunch of different state primaries going on recently. And it is the ones that are actually getting the most votes and getting to the point that they're going to be up in the election coming up in November are the ones who are just standing up and saying a man is a man, a woman is a woman. Why is this even an issue? And they are the ones that are just like in Ohio, they just basically swept the board on everybody that is going to be running for the Republicans in the upcoming midterm elections. And people are revolting. And the thing is, when you go after people's kids, that's when they're like, hey, wait a second. And I think we need to see some more parental rights bills, not only in schools in America, but where this is actually a little bit more taken off to the far woke left than we have in Canada yet. I am working on a story on some transgender issues here in Saskatchewan. And we need to really look at and say, okay, maybe we do need a parental rights bill here in Saskatchewan or Alberta or anywhere else in Canada, just like they have in the States. I can tell you that when my daughter was in school in Ontario, there was a day where they did, it was an Indigenous Day. And one of the activities they did during that day was they lied on the ground with a blanket on top of them for an hour so that they would feel like what Indigenous people feel like all the time because we're on their land. And she came home and tried to explain it. And it was just like, no one, like, yes, there's definitely Indigenous issues. I have actually written on them and I have other stories coming up about it. But, you know, she was 11 at the time. And this is stuff that's going on really young. And there was just a teacher fired in Florida. She said her 10 and 11-year-olds in her classroom asked her about what does pansexual mean? As if somehow they just magically knew she was pansexual. So she explained it. And then she had all the kids draw their sexuality on a sheet of paper and then also make a flag to represent their sexuality. And then posted them all on the door of the classroom. And the school administration saw it and said, please take that down. So she took them down, ripped them off the wall, went over to the recycling bin, crumpled them up, and threw them in the recycling bin in front of all the kids. And she ended up actually getting fired because it was not in the mandated curriculum for 10 and 11-year-olds to be making transgender and non-binary flags. And this is not just, these are not isolated incidents. So, you know, there needs to be firm laws set in place on what is allowed and not allowed to be taught in school. And quite frankly, I think sexuality should be taught by parents to their kids in their home, not by a teacher. And we've seen parental rights being stripped away constantly with this type of stuff.
It has to go to choice. That's the thing, though. Choice. I mean, you know, let parents choose. I mean, it gets into a much bigger issue. We should have a more diversified school system so parents can choose where they want their kids and what sort of education they're getting. But, you know, again, the woke always wants to jam us all into one public system with one mandate, and that's all you can do. And then likewise with media, I mean, with ourselves, as you said, you know, some of the ridiculousness out of the New York Times. I mean, we've based our style guide on the Canadian press, but we have our own style guide, as you've seen, and we're not going to embrace that crap. But I mean, look at the difference. You know, with the ascendancy, we're going up. New York Times is going down as an institution and outlets like ours. But what I fear for is that's when the government brings in things like C11. They bring in their attempts to control the internet and take away that choice. That's where people have to wake up. I mean, we don't have to tell people what they can say or what they can't say. Just let consumers, whether it's as parents in school or reading publications or listening to music, let them choose. And I think that's where the next battle is going to come. They're going to start taking away those choices, and we better be worried.
Yeah, and the thing is, like CBC turned off their commenting for their news stories a while ago because their journalists didn't like the comments on the stories, and it made them upset. And that was just like, okay, at the time when they did it, I was actually a news director at another organization. I said, we're never going to turn off our comments. I said, if someone wants to make a racist comment, let them make a racist comment so then we know they're racist. If you prevent them from being able to do it, you don't know who's a racist. And if someone wants to out themselves as being a racist, then let them. And CBC's version of how they want their news site to work is we're just going to stop all comments. So no one with the national broadcaster, which we all pay for with our taxes, can make a comment on a story they're doing. And as far as I'm concerned, comments should always be open on stories because no one should tell someone else what their viewpoint should be. The reason people read stuff and watch things is to learn and understand stuff. And maybe their opinion will change on something. They could have an opinion on Monday, read something on Tuesday, and have a different opinion on Wednesday. And that's what being in a free and open society is, the ability to share ideas regardless of whether you agree or disagree with them. And that is under attack. And that is something not only news organizations like us should be concerned about, but everybody should be concerned about. Because let's say you work for a company and you have to refer to anyone that's pregnant in the office as a pregnant person, or you get fired. Well, what if someone's religious belief says a man can't get pregnant? You're going to force them to do the opposite to keep their job? And I just think that it's a complete affront to like free speech. And one of the reasons the internet became so successful is because it was an arena of free speech. And now they're trying to control it. So literally they're trying to take the internet, which was mainly wide open to anyone who wanted to post anything, and then regulate it and have it like a little funnel system down to exactly what the government wants you to see. And you see this Office of Disinformation in the US that they're trying to start, which is basically going to say anything the government says is correct. And if you disagree with that, it's wrong. And once again, that's another way of trying to control information. And we need to stand against this. It's not the way. My grandfathers both fought in World War II. They did not fight for that. They fought for the opposite. They fought for your right to say, what do you think about something, and let other people make their decisions as well.
Well, and that's a good note to close it off on. I appreciate you coming on to join us in the columns you're putting out. Those will be coming out on weekends most often. And of course, you put a lot of news copy reporting on a lot of Saskatchewan items and events as they're going. So thanks again for coming on. Just to remind everybody, that's Christopher Oldcorn. You're on Twitter as well, of course. And throughout the standard here. I appreciate you joining us in the contributions.
Well, thank you very much, Cory. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks. Oops. Kind of pulled him quick there. That's okay. And that's the thing. There's just we can go on, and it's easy to go on for a long time because, I mean, it's just such a big and overwhelming subject and issue. I mean, it all ties into many other things. I got to hit quickly to one more of our sponsors before I go on some more news items and talk a bit more about what Chris was talking about, because I got an item that ties into that a bit. And that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys, I had their head, Tony Bernardo, on last Friday. We talked about some firearm things. Their name kind of says it all. They're an association for people who are into shooting sports. And that can cover all manner of things: target shooting, biathlon, skeet shooting, hunting, collecting. I mean, it doesn't really matter. If you own firearms, you enjoy firearms, you need to be a part of this association, because this is where you'll get the resources on safe firearm use, how you can network with other firearm owners. You can see events and news items related to firearms, where they're going to come up. And, just again, get a lot of videos, things on how to safely, properly use firearms, as most of us already do. It's not we law-abiding firearm owners who are causing the problems. It's illegal firearms. And that's the thing that part of the CSSA is doing, is they're lobbying on your behalf, because we've got a federal government that's always trying to take away your right and ability to enjoy firearms. And if you don't stand up for yourself, they're going to take it away. They're going to get away with it. They're doing it kind of a frog in water method now by constantly recategorizing and taking away the ones you can use. So you've got to stand up for yourself. And the CSSA is doing that for you. You got to help them help you. Take out a membership. Check them out. Canadian Shooting Sports Association, if you Google it, or go to cssa-cila.org. Take out a membership. It's a resource for yourself as a firearms owner, and it's well worth it. So, and of course, they are a fantastic sponsor. Okay, getting back to a little bit of what Chris was talking about, and we'll have more stuff coming from him. This is a news item. It's kind of interesting. This is where I find it dicey with the federal government getting involved in anything controlling business or communications. Yet at the same time, there's some concerns. So the feds are trying to block, I guess, or attempting a telecom block. There's a $26 billion buyout being proposed, involving two of the nation's four biggest corporations. It's been delayed for a year, and it might be blocked. Antitrust lawyers. And antitrust, for those not familiar with it, it's this type of legislation in Canada and the States dealing with large monopolies. I think Bill Gates got nailed with some of that in the early days of Microsoft. The Rockefellers got nailed with it with Standard Energy. They actually had to break that company up into a bunch of Standard Oil into a bunch of different companies, because it was just so overwhelmingly large that competition was being lost. But I don't like government getting in and meddling with the free market either. Canada is terribly poorly served when it comes to our telecommunications. I mean, yeah, there's only 4 big providers. Our prices are some of the highest on earth for services. They're terrible. I mean, we're averaging $69 a month for internet, $49 a month for mobile, $34 for telephone landlines. Well, for those few people who still have it, $25 for cable TV. Like, it all adds up. And if you go south of the border or to many other countries, Europe, even in that, far, far less, guys, far less. So the only way to deal with that, of course, is you need more competition. You need more competitors. You got to have them out there adding services, innovating, and getting the consumers the best deal they can. And if all these guys go into just one giant monolithic telecommunications group, the consumer is going to get screwed. But at the same time, how much do I want the government going in on my behalf and messing with private enterprise? So it's a difficult area. And the other areas that the government's getting into, not so much with the service providers, the telecommunications ones, but as I was speaking with Chris, is they want to control the information getting to us. That gets back to the social credit things that John Carpay was talking about too. How do we control this? They've tried now to shout people down, to cancel people, to scream. And as we saw from Chris's column, it's failing. Spotify's doing fantastic. You know, as I said, Dave Chappelle is packing stadiums for his comedy show, while CNN Plus went down the tubes in weeks or a couple of months. Disney's bleeding money. Netflix is bleeding money. The woke crap doesn't work. But if they force us to consume it, then we got a whole other issue. So that's where the Liberal government has a whole bunch of stuff coming down the pipe. They're trying to control the internet. They're trying to control which news outlets are allowed to cover news or not cover news, and who's going to run those outlets. And they're looking to put the screws to Facebook and other providers, Google, to give money to their preferred media outlets. It's a big problem. It's a big problem. And we do have to be concerned about this. And it all ties together. It's control. That's the big word of the decade of the generation, or maybe just in humanity. Governments always want control. They're not looking out for you. They're looking for control. And this is getting bad. Dave mentioned this too. Yeah, so here's another issue. The RCMP has fewer Indigenous members today than 10 years ago. They've been doing different training. They've been spending a lot of money. We know there's been a lot of preferred hiring, lots of outreach, all sorts of things, and it's just not working. There's a few reasons for it. I mean, we got where do you go to begin with it? I mean, there's a lot of mistrust between the natives and Indigenous people and the RCMP in general. It's not something that they would want to join. But I should mention, I don't know if it's different now, but one of the things with the RCMP is you get stationed somewhere else. And there was a guy I used to work with in the survey industry. He worked in the field with us, and he was from the Blood Reserve down south. He ended up moving to the Blackfoot Reserve. I'm getting out of date. I know it's what are they, Kenneys and Siksika reserves now. Either way, he was a Indigenous fella, and he went through all the training and became an RCMP officer. And then they transferred him and stuck him on reserves all over the place, and he hated it. That was his problem. But he wanted to be a police officer. He went through the training. He wanted to do all that stuff. But the problem was you get dropped on a reserve, and sure, he can relate to some degree more with the local people than on the Indigenous level than others. But it also led to a lot more pushback and difficulties he had. He wasn't exactly loved. He wasn't sent on to the reserves he was a part of. He was stationed into other reserves. So he's a gentleman of Blackfoot background, and he's getting stuck on a Dene reserve and things like that. It's not so easy. There's a lot of cultural differences. There's one of those bigger mistakes when it comes to Indigenous people too. When we talk about, the Haidas on the West Coast are nothing like the Mohawks in Ontario, who are nothing like the Plains Cree, who are nothing like the Northern Cree. There's a lot of differences between all of them. They're all considered Indigenous, but they have a lot of cultural differences, language differences, and attitudes. But, in a misguided sort of way, they took this fella I'd worked with and they stuffed him onto different reserves. Just think, well, one Native person's as good as another, and this he'll fit in real great there, and they'll really appreciate that presence there. And it didn't work well. So he just quit the RCMP altogether. Now, that's just one example. I got a feeling the problems are running a heck of a lot deeper than just that. But with the RCMP's efforts to try and get more First Nations involvement on them aren't working out well at all. This talks about the report, goes all the way back to the 1885 hanging of Louis Riel at a police barracks, and the mistrust that's hung for 100 and some years. Not sure how to change it. One of those areas, again, I've talked about, though, I don't, aside from being a federal force, I don't think I've lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, provincial force. Yeah, keep the RCMP force. Let's get provincial. Get out of some of these things. Sorry, I was looking at the comments. Somebody saying the F you mean capitalism is wrong. Who said that? Either way. So I get distracted by the comments, but I do read them, guys, and I do appreciate them. So I don't recall ever saying capitalism's wrong. So perhaps it was somebody else he's referring to. Oh yeah, this one's a neat one. It turns out one of the big RCMP grabs, they've found an Ontario man and charged him with having 10,000 counterfeit toonies. And no, Ashley, don't tell me how to refer to people. So it's counterfeit toonies. Where are you in this world where you're actually going to counterfeit Canadian $2 coins? Yet this is what happened. This was an RCMP investigation in the summer of 2021. And, counterfeiting is real. It's a problem. It's an issue. I just never would have imagined. I mean, I would guess these have got to be difficult to make. That's a coin in coin, type of stamping in that. It can't be that easy. It can't be that cheap. How much does it cost to make a counterfeit Canadian $2 coin? Yet this gentleman, he was charged. 10,000 were discovered. Okay, that's a lot of them, but that's $20,000 worth. It's probably cost $10,000 to make the darn things, and I just don't get it. I mean, if you're going to be that good at it and being able to do something, wouldn't it be better to make a larger denomination of bill? How do you launder that? How many places you got to go around buying stuff with toonies to get it into the system? I'm sure if you're going to your regular bank every couple of weeks with a few $1,000s in toonies, they're going to raise some alarm bells. I don't know, just bizarre. Either way, if you have gotten a counterfeit one, you can tell apparently by the polar bear on it that has a split toe on the front right toe, the front right foot that resembles a claw. Not that I think you'd care on a $2 coin. I think it'd be almost collectible if you get one of those counterfeit ones. I guess you could set aside and say, yeah, I got one of these. Some nutcase made counterfeit $2 Canadian coins. Well, whatever. There's always somebody trying to beat the system one way or another. And, okay, so Ashley, yes, look up the definition of indigenous. Look, I'm not going into the language, splitting hairs and definitions and stuff going down the road. I'm going to go back and forth on the terms. I know what I'm talking about, what I mean. I'm sorry if you don't like my definition of it, but that's what I'm going to use. I appreciate the feedback. I do, and such. If you want to get me mad really fast, tell me what I can or should say or can't say. And I'll always get worked up every time. So yeah, I'm giving the instructions to people if they want to get my vein pulsing and get me worked up. There's the way to do it. But either way, I do appreciate feedback, even if I get grumpy with you at times. So either way, the Canadian Mint is still working on their things with that. Let's see. The House of Commons, I think this is happening today. Yes, there's a motion from the Bloc where they've been reading a prayer to start off the sessions of the House of Commons every day since 1877. So it's a pretty long-standing Canadian tradition. And the Bloc Québécois wants that to stop. They want to replace it with just a 2-minute reflection at the start of business for every day. Says the prayer should be scrapped because the House respects the beliefs and non-beliefs of all parliamentarians and the general public. I'm not a big Bloc fan typically, though. I mean, I can't knock them for being unapologetically pro-Quebec and so on. I think maybe it's time, though. I mean, it's not like it makes a big deal. It's a symbolic gesture. It's a thing. And he's not talking about doing nothing. I mean, if you have a moment of silence, it says, and you'll have some other things that people of different faiths can observe themselves every day as it starts out, and don't have to go into, because it is it's a prayer that reflects the times. It's praying to God and saying specific things that don't apply to every party who's standing in that house. And it's just, religion doesn't really have a place in the parliament anymore. It really shouldn't. We're past then. I mean, that's for a person personally, for their home, for their place of worship or things like that. But in the houses of governance, I'm a pure secular supporter. It absolutely should be. Here's some beauty things of municipal governments. I've been on the Canadian, the Albertan ones with Edmonton and Calgary. Ottawa, boy, well, of course, we saw their mayor. He's quite the crackpot. Watson, I think his name is. But they've had a city-run program that's supposed to provide temporary stopgap solutions for those in need of emergency shelter. So they've been putting them in hotels and motels across Ottawa for years, and it's not going anywhere. Those say they've been stuck in tight quarters for months. I mean, if you are somebody who's sliding through the cracks, a hotel room is better than being out on the street, you know, where you could freeze to death and a great number of problems. But motels aren't great for long-term living. Yeah, you got 2 beds, a bathroom, and such, and people are stuffed in there, so it's not good for those who are homeless. Plus, it's phenomenally expensive. So since 2014, they've placed 21,000 chronically homeless families and individuals in hotel and motel rooms, and they're waiting for openings on the Ottawa community housing. This gets down to the housing shortage is going to be getting a lot worse and a lot more critical everywhere as we go ahead here. But unfortunately, part of the problem, not a part of a huge part of the problem, are these rotten municipal governments that are constantly stunting it, that have this insane ideological notion of squeezing into these high density paradises, and they ban outside development. They fight it and they demonize it as sprawl. But the reality is they just, all they've done is caused housing prices to go up, and they've caused a supply shortage, which makes it impossible for people of a lower income to end up in homes, and you get this mess. So it's self-perpetuating. I don't expect these ding-dongs in Ottawa to understand that and realize it. And actually, Chris was talking about that as well. I think there's a giant tent city in Saskatchewan that's really starting to expand out in Saskatoon, I believe it is. Or maybe it was Regina. And they've also had loads of people being kept in hotels to deal with the homelessness. Talk about a stopgap and not a good way to deal with it. So let's see. Tomorrow, I'm going to wrap things up here. I got a good show coming on. I've got author Regine Venne. I'll have to look that up. I've slaughtered people's names. But he put out a book recently. He's just documented. He's an author. He's put out other books as well on as an unvaccinated person, on what he's been experiencing and how we're dividing our country based on this and how destructive it is for the country. It's a pretty big subject. And then I'm going to have Lee Harding. He's one of our Saskatchewan reporters. He writes a lot of stuff on the Western Standard as well. And we're going to talk about, Saskatchewan's got a Saskatchewan United Party now. There's a new party has formed out there, and I believe they got one member of the legislature already because it was a floor crossing. So they're there and established. We as Conservatives just keep spawning these parties, in Alberta we got a few, and we've got a new one in Saskatchewan. We got the Buffalo Party there too. We got the Ontario Party in Ottawa. But what do you do? Do you stick with the PCs, or in their case, it's the Saskatchewan Party that they feel perhaps is leaving behind, or do you try to form something new? Do you fix things from within? Do you sometimes, when you start something new, create something worse than what it was to begin with? Look what we're doing with the UCP. What a gong show and a disaster that is right now. And that came about from merging the Wild Rose with the Progressive Conservatives, and the hybrid turned out to be almost worse, it seems, than a lot of what we had 10 years ago. So it's not moving forward. But what do we do? So we're going to talk to Lee about that. Danielle Smith's going to have her show on again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. as well. So be sure to check that out on our social media channels. And hey, if you just caught this, make sure to subscribe on those channels, particularly Rumble, because, that's one that won't cancel us. That's where we run all the time. We did get pulled off for a little while because Danielle dared to talk about vaccines, and they triggered the old algorithms, and we got yanked for a bit. So make sure to subscribe on Rumble and share it on Rumble. That's how we can spread the word too, and it keeps us secure, and you can make sure you don't miss anything when things are breaking. And that's about it for today, guys. So thank you very much for tuning in. I do appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.